You're listening to the Alex Wolf Podcast. Interesting conversations about innovation, economics, culture, and history for the independent thinkers and curious minds. I'm your host, Alex Wolf. Hi, thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Alex Wolf Podcast. Been having a great time connecting with you all. And I'm going to jump right into it today. So what I wanted to talk about this week is, or what I'm calling this episode is, spoiler alert, your ego can never be happy, and other thoughts on life. And I thought it would be a great time to talk about it as the holiday season comes into being, because I feel like the holiday season is such a great time to experience what it's like to want something and then get it and then be over it kind of quickly. You know, kind of when you were a kid and you got gifts and you kind of learned early on that the anticipation of those gifts almost felt better than the day you got the gifts, and especially the day after. So what is that about? I think that has a lot to do with the ego, and that's what I want to talk about today. And take away with it what you will, as far as maybe you just care about the ego part, but I will be tying this into how it's relevant to tech philosophy and the world that we live in, because I do believe there is a difference in inventions that are invented out of our ego awareness and our organic awareness, and I'll talk about that. So this, again, is for the people who are confused about why they are still unhappy, even if after they've achieved certain levels of success or what they want. And I talk about this because I if you know my story, you know I've experienced this a lot. I chased a certain dream, I chased a certain image, and I achieved it, and it was the worst time of my life. So I think I'm very grateful I had the experience, because it opened life up to me and it opened up different passions for me. But it's something that I just feel I see happening all around me, especially, as you know, as an entrepreneur, and the culture around chasing success and chasing happiness. And just this idea of, is this something to chase, or is it something we don't have to chase? What is the nature of these things, and are they mice, or meaning, like, do we have to chase them like cats, or are they something like the sun, where it's just abundant and all around us, but we don't interpret it that way? So there are a lot of interpretations about what the ego is. I want to just kind of say that because I'm going to be talking about Alan Watts' interpretation. But I think for the most part, people associate it with like your bad side, right? Generally, right? Unless you get super into some psychology. If you just talk about like, oh, so-and-so has a big ego, or what an ego, people are basically saying, like, they're talking about this quote unquote bad side, this quote unquote selfish side or greedy side. And I agree that the ego is that, but I feel like there's so much more, right? So I'm going to share Alan Watts' interpretation because it's been most helpful to me, and maybe it'll be helpful to you. So the best way to lay the foundation so it's best understood is to understand that you have what I would call like an organic awareness, and you have an ego awareness. Now, remember when I was talking about Zen? I don't know if you heard me talking about Zen in my other episodes, but the reason why I find Zen to be so soothing is because it's about really tapping into this organic awareness. And the way I define that is interpreting an awareness that interprets life through a neural experience, and it is also absent of concepts. So what I'm talking about is, just, it could be as minute as the wind blowing on your skin, your taste receptors tasting tomato or wine or something. It is your neurological response to your environment. It's the involuntary response that your body has to the environment. So usually when we look at, people sitting in meditation, we're like, oh my God, what the hell? That looks like torture. But what they're doing is they're just tapping into their organic awareness, which is a really enjoyable experience once you can enjoy the neural receptivity of sitting down or whatever. I don't I don't sit down because I don't think you need to sit down, but we'll save that topic for another day. But the point I'm making is there's a whole idea that sometimes there's people who really believe that the best thing to do is just sit and experience everything, not to think, but to experience. And your organic awareness, again, it's about that consciousness of a baby. It's about the consciousness that does not yet have a name for things. There was a great sentence in one of the books I was reading that was talking about, the analogy of Adam and Eve, and how Adam, when he saw animals, he did not know the names of the animals yet. He saw the animal before he saw the name. Now, we underestimate how much knowing words and knowing names for things before we experience them influences our lives and influences our happiness. It does. And again, we really underestimate that. So I'm hoping that will be more clear by the end of this episode. But the point I'm making is that this organic awareness can be really the shit for a lot of people. Maybe it's not for you. Maybe you prefer to have an ego awareness. Now, the ego awareness interprets life through concepts, right? And abstracts. It sees lines where there are none. So for example, the ego can't see a globe without seeing the equator, or they can't, it's that kind of perspective where they are so focused on what can be measured, hierarchy, lines, at any scale, right? It could be trying to work their way up at a company. It could be having a conversation and them not being able to understand something unless it's super defined. But the ego awareness needs this matrix, right? And I say that not matrix is a real term for a net to cast mathematical equations so you can measure things. It's literally a net, right? Remember when we were in school, they would have those like graphs, and then you would use the points to mark where on the matrix something was. Now, the world, the universe is not, there's no lines in the universe. And so the only way we are able to predict things, the only way we are able to measure things is by throwing a net or a matrix over it, so that even the most sophisticated curves and lines can be broken down into tiny, tiny points of measurement. And we do that with something as vast as, water, but we also do that with our lives. So the ego awareness really digs these, and it understands life as a road that should lead to a personal sort of utopian or ideal situation. It's not seeing all the squiggly lines underneath the matrix. It's just seeing the matrix, and it's saying, okay, how high can I get up here? And if I do not get high on this net, then I will punish myself. I will feel inadequate. I will feel blah, 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 blah. But the joke's on the ego, because even when you do get that high, you still feel like crap. So, and you see this expressed through shiny object syndrome. So that's just, it's the same as saying you see your cup half empty instead of half full. So you just constantly focus on what you don't have. You also see it with the walking blues. I feel like millennials suffer a lot from this. We are, we'll quickly relocate. We'll quickly kind of move from situation to situation or relationship to relationship because we think what we're looking for is right around the corner. I don't want to peg millennials as the only one. The walking blues is actually an old term, but it comes from, fathers who would leave the home and try to kind of find, a thrill somewhere else and a thrill somewhere else. And it's very connected to that half empty, because instead of focusing on what you have, it's about, okay, what more can I get? You can also see the ego awareness expressed when people feel or say or think, I will only be happy when. I will only be happy when I make this much. I will only be happy when I have this thing, when blah, 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 which is such an unfortunate thing to fall for. I don't want to pass a judgment, but I do think it sucks. I think even if you're going through that, you agree that it sucks, because you can't, again, you're kind of numb to what's around you because your ego awareness is so honed in on, that you're just constantly feeling like it's impossible to be happy until a certain thing is reached. And that sucks. So yeah, your ego will never be happy because it thinks that concepts are real. It thinks that all of these things are real. And so another great way of thinking about it is your organic awareness is like a floodlight, right? And your ego awareness is like a laser beam. It's concentrated light. So for example, say you had a floodlight, and a floodlight is kind of like a widespread light. It's not a hyper focused. Now, say you put a big piece of paper over that floodlight, and then you took a pin and you stabbed the pin, you'd have one really strong beam coming out of that floodlight. But as we know, you're in mostly darkness. So if you're only operating out of that type of awareness, you're not allowing all the other light that you have access to shine, because you're so, again, hyper focused on operating out of this awareness. So what I think sucks is that we bash the ego. We say, oh, the ego, it's bad. That person is an ego driven person, or, we should kill the ego. And I'm going to get to that in a second. But I think what's important is to understand that part of the reason why the ego can never be happy is because it's the watchdog of your consciousness. It is this hyper self-aware part of your consciousness. Again, this one little streak of light within this whole, floodlight. And what do watchdogs do? They are literally on patrol. They have a radar. They are scanning for danger. So the reason why your ego can't be happy is because it's literally looking for problems. It's literally trying to figure out how it's going to get higher and higher on this matrix, right? However large or small the matrix is. And it's not designed to be like this cool thing that you can just relax with. It's like if you had a watchdog and you really need a watchdog for some property you had, and the thing just sat there and didn't like watch stuff, you would be pissed, right? So, what's still important to understand is that just because you have this watchdog, it doesn't mean it's who you are. It's not who you are, at least through this Alan Watts interpretation. You can believe whatever you want to believe. But this worked for me, and that's why I'm saying, like, maybe, I don't know, it could be helpful or clarifying for you. But the point I'm saying is that that type of awareness is just a tiny, tiny sliver. So why operate everything out of that awareness? So here's the thing. Once you become more receptive, right? Once you start to tap in to that organic awareness, what happens is the illusion of this ideal destination dissolves, and you interpret reality, more. You see this rippling nature of it. You see the squiggliness of it. You see it as sort of like a rippling field of behavior, of stimuli, of things moving around, instead of this like ladder to climb, instead of this like intense structure to grind hard for, right? And back to, I just think that's a lot, right? That's in itself something to kind of reevaluate when it comes to how do we think about how we operate out of our ego and how much of it helps versus hurts. Now let's go back to, does this mean that the ego is a sickness? Does this mean we should kill the ego? Well, my answer to that is going to be no. Some people think you should, right? We see that a lot. I think a lot of pop sci and pop culture really feels like the ideal personality and the ideal sort of destination is that you should kill your ego and try as hard as you can every day to meditate and become a perfect, kind, compassionate, Jesus-like person, and that is their destination. And that's fine. I think if that's your goal, that's fine. That wasn't going to work for me because, the reason why Alan Watts' interpretation helped me, because it wasn't asking me to be perfect, right? In my opinion, I feel like to try to be this saint like figure is to ask to take away my humanity, right? I'm not saying that's for everybody. I'm saying that I see that our flaws, our rage, our whatever, all of our emotions, I don't think that some emotions are okay and should, have the green light, and then some of them are bad. I think all of them, it's not even about good or bad. I think all of them make us human. And I think that to try to ask us to not feel or realistically feel those things is just, it sucks. Like, it's doomed to failure. I think it creates bigger problems. I think it's why you see hypocrisy in a lot of these places where so much rules are enforced, and you see that the same person who's enforcing all of them is literally breaking all of them, because there's no breathing room. Everything in the world, everything in nature, everything that we build, if you build a skyscraper and you don't give it room to sway, it will break and collapse. If again, I've talked about spider webs before. I've talked about just strength in nature. Strength in nature has never been things without bendability. There's always give for something going in an opposite direction. There's absorption. When there isn't that give, it's a sign the thing is dead. It's a sign the thing is going to break. Think about a tree, a branch, you know what I mean? When it's still alive and the tree is well, it will bounce. It will snap back and like catapult. But when it's dead, when it's dry, when it's too rigid, it's dead. So I like to use analogies in nature to better understand my nature. And I also feel like the ego is a very important tool to use, and convention, I interpret it as a convention. I interpret it as a convention like the number 3, for example. The number 3 is not a real thing, but it's a convention we use to better operate our society. And so your ego is something that we use so that we can have like civilization, right? So why would I want to get rid of that? Because there's obviously benefits for me as a human being to have that civilization. Here's where I think everything goes haywire. I think this is why people hate the ego. It's not because they hate civilization, but because they associate it with this evil side, this bad side, the selfish side. For me, I see that there is a big difference between looking through or acting as your ego and identifying with it. This is a theme you see in almost every ancient religion, in almost every ancient culture. There is some type of narrative around not identifying with this ego, because that's where you get the problems. To know that to afford to live in a society means that, yes, you will have to put on a role. You will have to either be the bread maker, the candlestick maker. I messed it up. How does it go? Bread maker, candlestick maker, whatever. You got to do something, right? And you have to be seen as something in order to afford the privileges that come with living in a civilization. Because if not, okay, the other route is to just, we can't run the civilization not having roles, not having identities. Good luck. You can try. So here's the big difference between looking through or acting as your ego versus identifying. So looking and acting, usually these people who understand their ego is like, again, this little pinhole of light in the spectrum of light of their awareness, they don't take their identity or life too seriously, right? They have that give, they have that bend. You'll also notice that they can appreciate life's mysteries, right? They can, instead of getting freaked out because they don't know what's going to happen at 5 o'clock tomorrow, or even what's going to happen with bigger things, right? The world or whatever, their life. They, again, are kind of, they're put in this awe, they're put in this wonder from that mystery instead of fear. Or maybe even if they do feel fear, they really feel the fear and they process it instead of trying to avoid the fear, because, again, spoiler alert, trying to avoid fear is fear. So that's another trait that people have when they are looking or acting through their ego. And also another very common trait is they can embrace and process life's drama and the unexpected. Now, I didn't say that they create drama. I didn't say they make problems out of nothing. There is a certain amount of drama that life will have, even if you are coming from a perfect, quote unquote, perfect family, even if you went to quote unquote perfect school. There is no one alive that doesn't have a personal drama in their lives, at least a couple episodes. Okay. And so when you don't identify with your ego, when you're only looking or acting out of it, you can embrace and process that drama in a way more efficient, I guess you can say, way. Because the thing is, when you can't process it, it gets stuck and then it creates more. And it's kind of like an infection. It gets worse, you know? So that's another trait of when you are looking or acting. You have a certain, again, give of the unexpected. You have a certain flexibility. It's not to say you're not this compassionate, kind, always, never loses it person. You still might lose it, but you're not identifying with this little stream of consciousness. The reason why I say that is because, for me, I used to think that I should look up to people who seemed kind of like holy or perfect. And, to me, the idea of that today just freaks me out, because I have learned the hard way that the more of a pedestal you put someone on, the more you're just kind of, again, setting yourself up to be humiliated by your expectations, because you're not giving that person to breathe. You literally have cast or projected an image of this person that is not human, and it's not fair. And I see that happen all the time too, even in business. I felt it happening to me as I built my first business. I got all this attention of like, she just is a genius. She must have done everything perfect because I had a viral business. And so that must mean like, I really felt this pressure of like, oh my God, they think I'm like, they think I'm perfect or something. And it makes me laugh, because I'm just like, you have to be kidding me. I was far from it, still am, and proud to be. I don't even look for idols per se anymore. I'm just very nourished by people who I can tell are just, they have that breathing room, and I want to give them that breathing room. Let me tell you right now, if I have idols, I don't want to meet them, because I do believe in the saying that you don't want to meet your idols. You know why they say that? Because you might meet them, and if the experience is not what you had in mind, then it can ruin all the years, that you were devoted to their music or whatever. I prefer the relationship I want to have with the people I look up to is just a fan idol relationship. That's it. Because to ask for more would be to ask to ruin it in most cases. So in other words, what I'm saying is that you got to be careful when there's this really just this perfection thing. Perfection is dead. Anything that's perfect is not alive. There's no oxygen running through it. Have you ever tried to be perfect? You feel like you can't breathe because you feel like one exhale is going to tear the whole thing apart. So I had to learn the hard way, like, no. Okay, I'm going to give myself breathing room. I'm going to give you breathing room. one of my, I have to pick up like packages in my building, and the lady downstairs, I think I made a mistake or she made a mistake, but she said something so beautiful, and I made the mistake. I thought a package was there and it wasn't. And she said, you know, oh, something like, we never make mistakes here. But it was totally like sarcastic. But it warmed my heart because she gave me breathing room. I felt like it was such a sincere, kind thing to say. And I really loved that. I was like, I'm going to use that. You know, when someone makes a mistake in my presence, I'm going to try because again, I'm not perfect. Shit, I might lose my patience and be like, you should have. But if I do have it in me to act on that sincere kindness, I would love to say something like that because we have to give each other breathing room. All right. Next is what I was going to say is, okay, here's what it sounds or looks like when you're identifying with your ego. When you're identifying with this little beam of light, you most likely will experience chronic anxiety to climb some kind of social ladder and to reach, again, that abstract destination. So the points we put on our matrix are things like prizes, trophies, awards, etc. Some people love this. This is not a judgment. This is not Alex saying, oh, anybody who wants a trophy is dumb. That's not what I said. If this is what you want, then this is what you want. I'm talking for people who don't want this, who feel like, you know what does a trophy have to offer me? There's that great clip of Beyonce saying that she worked her literally up to her childhood. It took up to her having blue ivy before she realized she never had a childhood. She had to make the child to be like, oh my God, whatever happened to me? You know, as far as like she looked up one day and she was 30 something. She had this kid, and she says in the video that she worked so hard for these trophies. And then that was why she bashed all the trophies in the Drunken Love video. And that was a reoccurring theme in the self-titled album, because she was saying, fuck these trophies. You know, she says, I starved for it. I neglected people I loved. For what? She's like, nothing warms my heart like my kids saying mommy, or seeing my husband, blah, 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 blah. Because the important things of life are, I mean, how many times do we have to say it? You look around and it's like everyone's chasing. And I'm like, is your heart beating? Do your arms work? You know what I mean? Can you see? Can you hear? Like, I don't know. That's just me. Another thing that'll happen if you identify with your ego is you take life and you take yourself very seriously. You ever been around somebody like that? They're just so controlling. Like, it's like scary. It's like, why are you being so, and then the other thing is that they usually desperately cling to ideology and technology as a way to manage their fear of life's drama and the unexpected. So instead of just saying, I'm a being on the planet, we're floating in outer space, I don't even know, they say it's gravity, but I don't know, I'm just so enamored with like the mysteries of the universe. Instead of that, it's, oh my God, how am I going to live forever? How are we going to conquer space? It can be, I need this in my car, or I need this in my house. And to a certain extent, I understand it. I'm not saying we should all just like unlock our doors and say, hey, of course, there's certain technology I think is very wise and sustaining. But once the technology starts to be the beginning of your demise and make a shell out of your humanity, that's when you should start asking, are you overdoing it? Do you think you're trying to control something that can't be controlled? And so when you identify with your ego, you are usually, again, trying to cling to an ideology or a technology to manage these fears instead of just being humbled by this universe and saying, wow, it's a miracle I'm here and I'm going to take this day by day and feel all I can feel. It's a lot. Do you know what I mean? Asking that out of the average American seems like a lot. But I feel like once you get that wear and tear, once you've been floating around for a little bit, you're kind of excited to be like, oh, wow, I don't have to like climb as much as I thought. Everything's not about this. So since part of what the other thing that the ego awareness does is that it understands itself as a separate identity. And this is where things start to become relevant to tech philosophy. And tech philosophy is the world we live in, right? We are living some man's tech philosophy, some era's tech philosophy. We have continued a idea about what should be invented and for why. So ego awareness understands itself as a separate identity, which means it has a hard time identifying with others unless there are clear social indicators implying a connection. Things like education, it could be like things like skin color, things like location, right? And that is, again, that is the watchdog. The watchdog's like, I don't know, y'all. Like, yeah, we could do the kumbaya holding hands thing, in theory, but the ego awareness really just sees itself as this separate individual and only feels the need to group with individuals it has relations to, which that's human. What you're going to tell me that's not a part of being a human being? Look around, read a history book. It's always been that way. But here's the issue. When you identify with the ego, right? Because again, the ego awareness sees someone who's a different color or who has different values, and they interpret the person as alien or potentially a threat to their ego awareness livelihood. When you zoom out even more, you'll see that ego awareness, not only does it not see a resemblance in different people, but it doesn't see a resemblance with itself and the world. It doesn't see its resemblance with itself and the wind or the mountains, right? It doesn't understand what it has to deal with grass or the sun, right? It's like, oh, well, the sun is the sun in the sky. Well, you wouldn't be alive without the sun, like literally not even for probably a few minutes. So there's a very important relationship you have with the sun and with the wind and the grass. It's not just this separate thing. It's literally connected to your livelihood, to not just your heart beating. Oh, well, air is just air. Well, do you need air to breathe in your lungs? Because I thought you did. Again, you go in a lot of Native American traditions. They had a very close relationship with nature. Most indigenous cultures and stuff did. They're like, look, we don't play around. We know that with no sun, there'd be no us. We know that without, identifying with more than, not identifying with this ego has reason for meaning and life. So the ego awareness will knock a mountain down to build a house. And the organic awareness knows that he is the mountain at some scale, right? Not literally, but there's a relationship between us and the earth that if severed, threatens our life and our population. So the man who has that organic awareness finds a mountain that will gladly turn into a house for him. Now that might sound a little weird, but it's really a deep concept, because when it comes to tech philosophy, there are certain people who operate out of the ego awareness and they say, I I am just a man or woman in this world, and and nature is outside of me. So let me, whatever, build things under this predicated idea that we are separate. Well, welcome to the USA. This is what society looks like. This is what the oceans look like. This is what the rivers look like. This is what the air pollution looks like when you think you are separate. Okay. Now, I think we're learning the hard way that, oh, actually all this shit is connected. There's a certain tech philosophy that operates more out of that organic awareness, the neural receptivity, the abstract of the absence of the concepts, meaning not taking the concepts too seriously, building out of not the net, but the energy, the field of behavior under the net. Boom. So what does life turn into after you start building from that type of awareness? Well, things look differently. Something might be showing you what it wants to be. That you start to hear that the environment has a will just as much as we do. The Western ideology says our will is king. Well, it's our will. We're gonna submit this vast will of nature. Because I don't know what makes people think, I don't care what town you're in, all it takes is one earthquake, one tsunami, one blah, blah, blah. One little virus, one little baby virus that you can't even see, okay? All it takes is one of those things before your whole little ship, your whole little community is knocked over. But somehow many of us feel like, well, we have the power. We'll science it out. We'll tech it out. Okay, fine, whatever. I'm not saying we should not have science. I'm not saying I love science and I love technology. But what can we create when we are using science and tech out of this organic awareness? Out of saying, instead of me knocking the mountain down, where can I go where shelter is implied through the geography? Where can I go where this invention is implied? It's funny because I just moved and I made a silverware drawer. There's a bunch of drawers, like a lot, right? More than I'm used to. And so I made one of those my silverware drawer. And after living here for about a week, I kept opening another drawer thinking my silverware was in there, but it wasn't. And eventually I took it as a sign that this house wants the silverware drawer here. Not in a spooky, creepy way, but just the design, right? Being sensitive to the design and the relationship I have with the house. It's not just, oh, I move into the house and I'm the big, strong human and I have control over everything. No, it's this mutual relationship. The wood was nice enough to turn into a goddamn drawer. I'm going to use the drawer that I can tell through the design and the layout of the room. It showed me where the silverware drawer is through living my life, my everyday, ordinary, beautiful life. The silverware drawer showed me where it is. Now, of course, if I have some engineers on the line, y'all are probably like, oh Lord, this sounds foo. But if you really look at the stories of the most crazy, I don't want to say crazy, beautiful, romantic inventions in the world, read the stories of the Wright brothers, the brothers who built the airplane. And you tell me if they didn't have a certain sensitivity to how that design of that airplane needed to fly, okay? You think they went in there and they said, we're men and we want to fly, so it doesn't work like that. When you really get to design, when it really comes to inventing shit to preserve what makes you, not just inventing for the convenience or the cheapness or the whatever, but inventing to enhance this relationship you have with the planet Earth, you better shut up and listen. You better hear what the wind has to say, the way the wood is growing, the way the metals are mined. Okay, this is not just some free place where you get to, the resources are finite. And if you live in the USA, you won't know. Well, maybe you'll know recently because this pandemic, it's the first time we've had empty shelves, and the panic, Lord, the panic that caused. Oh, what, you think the planet just comes with bread shelves? No, honey, that took generations, centuries of economics, of trade, of sensitivity to invention, all this other shit. So this is why I talk about the ego. People are like, oh, Alex, well, don't you talk about tech philosophy? Why are you talking about the ego? Well, what do you think all the tech is being built from? Let's talk about Facebook. Okay, well, Facebook was invented by Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg was 19 years old at Harvard. And the first rendition of the app was to rate how hot the women were on campus. I feel like half of my audience probably already knew that. Maybe you're just learning that. But that's what it first was. I'm not saying that's bad. Again, what do I always say? I say it's the mindset. How did it become this powerful of a force? You think that type of invention had the same sensitivity to the nature of relationships? Wait, so you're making an invention to help people communicate? Have you thought it out? So boom. What makes the story so crazy is that all the investors had to see were numbers. Again, matrix. All they had to see is, oh, this point is up on the matrix or whatever, the net. This point is marked. So if I put money in, then I'm going to be higher on the mark. They don't even know what the fuck the numbers mean because half of them didn't even use computers or know how to use any of this crap. They really just use numbers that they don't even understand the context of to make huge decisions that have impacted our lives. So I'm not complaining per se, but what I'm saying is, aren't you fascinated about all this? Isn't this relationship crazy? And do you feel the difference between things that are invented for your humanity versus that are invented for your ego? You know what I'm saying? Again, I'm not saying we should throw all the ego stuff away. I'm saying I think we've made too many inventions out of that. And that we get all, excited on Twitter, pop culture. Oh my God, look at this show got watched more than any other show. Why is that an accomplishment? Why do I want half of the nation watching one show? That freaks me the hell out. You know what I mean? Especially in a world where we could all be watching different things. I don't know. Maybe I'm a hater. Who knows? I don't care. If I am, I am. But I ask these questions because it's just very important that I offer an opportunity for other people who care about this to nerd out with me, to ask, yeah, what is it about all this stuff? Why are some inventions, still here and others change so quickly? And why do we judge the merit of, I've asked this before, why do we judge the merit of technology based on how quickly we can outdate it? Why are we not praising the tech that has made it through every generation that we can think back as far as? So that's what I have to say for today. Your ego awareness, you'll never be happy with your ego. It's fun. I actually have, at this point, when I have my days where it's like I have so much to be grateful for, and I'll still have my very regular human being, United States person days where I'm like, I hate everything. And I know, oh, that's my ego. My ego hates everything. My ego's not happy. Surprise, surprise. I don't even invest in it. I don't. There's clean water running out my pipes. When that stops, okay. Then you'll have my organic awareness tap in. That's the neuroreceptivity. Other than that, all of it was just, so many of us were just so miserable over nothing. These abstract, I didn't make it on this list. He didn't call me. She didn't text me back. Honey, it's the drama of life. Like I said, the people who look through or act out of their ego instead of identify with it, it gets to be fun. You're just kind of like, oh my God, life. Look at it go. Look at it go. I want to talk about another day how funny it is that we really think that everything we want, like say in a day, how we will really get mad if everything doesn't go as according to plan, and how we will get mad each day that happens. I think it's so fascinating because if you really look at life, it never really always goes to plan. So it's just so funny when, and I was laughing at myself. I think I was reading some Pema Chodron, and she was just like, people really get upset when they plan something. It could be something so little like, I was supposed to, take out the trash by this time and I didn't, or someone else, oh God, someone else was supposed to do it and they didn't, that just makes me mad. What? What? It's just so funny that it's like in life, yeah, most of the time shit is just gonna go, it's just gonna, don't you see what's under this net? It's just beautiful life going on. And sometimes it goes this way and sometimes it goes that way, but it's clear it doesn't just go the way the ego wants it to go. And the organic awareness has more peace with that. And the ego awareness that isn't identifying with it has more peace with it. It's funny. It's what makes a movie. It's what makes a life. When things go this and that way, it is what it is. So whatever. The control freaks are not going to hear me. They've turned off. They're like, Alex, you're crazy. But the ones who are like, I get it. Imperfectness. Breath of fresh, some breathing room. Fall in love with your imperfect life. It's imperfect. It always will be. Let the perfectionists be miserable if they want to be. All right. Thank you so much for listening. As always, tweet me or send me a message, send me an email. And I really appreciate you listening. Have a merry holiday, whatever it is you celebrate, and see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Alex Wolf Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review. And if you aren't already, make sure you're subscribed to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. For more resources on innovation, economics, and culture, visit alexwolf.co/newsletter and sign up for my email list. Thanks.